We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Yanish.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Amon.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Dockin.
Here.
Fagerly.
Here.
DeBleek.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Would you all please stand as we say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any proposed additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, we will move into the consent items. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item
Application for Charter Commission, Mr. Robert Enos. We'll pull that one.
Mr. Mayor, got a question on item D, Planning Commission.
Okay, and we'll pull the minutes for that. Planning Commission minutes for August 14th. Any further?
no.
Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item C, the Utilities Commission minutes. I'd like to pull them and speak to them.
We will pull the minutes from the Municipal Utilities Commission minutes for August 12th. Any further?
I move to approve the balance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the balance of the minutes other than the Municipal Utilities Commission minutes, the Planning Commission minutes, and the application for Charter Commission, Mr. Robert Enos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That motion carries. Let's start out with the Charter Commission minutes.
Just a question. I know that Mr. Enos is on another committee of the city, and I always thought it was our policy or practice to only be on one committee or of the city, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that or
I will speak to that, and the fact is that Mr. Enos has agreed that if he is appointed to the Charter Commission, that he will resign his appointment to the EDC board. Am I right?
Okay.
On that?
Then I would move to approve the application to the Charter Commission for Mr. Robert Enos.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the application for Charter Commission to Mr. Robert Enos. Is there any discussion?
Yes. I believe the Charter Commission has already submitted 2 names in for that too. I mean, they have 2 willing people to be on that board.
I understand that there are 2 people. Am I correct?
That is correct. 2 names were submitted by the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission is able to submit names as well, and they did so directly.
And so we can.
Yes, and then the appointment is made by the district judge.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The policy that states that they can't be on 2 boards or commissions at a time, is that a written policy that we have, or is that an unwritten policy?
It's been a policy of the council, as I understand it.
Perhaps the city clerk could better speak to that.
It is an unwritten policy, we believe a past practice that we've adhered to 100%.
So we do have unwritten policies. Because I brought one up at the finance meeting about reviewing the CIP before any monies got spent. I believe that's an unwritten policy also. But we'll talk about that later.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Amon?
I think we have had people that have been very active in our community that have served on more than one commission, maybe not the Charter Commission, but they serve on more than one board in the city. And that has happened.
I don't know of
Are
any.
we dealing only with this issue of the Charter Commission people? Because we have, in the past, allowed other people to serve on 2 different boards.
Well, I believe if they're under the control of the full council, we do not do that.
Councilman Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we can easily resolve that by just referring that to a committee, and at some point in time, there's no urgency, but at some point in time, we can and should talk about that.
Let's do that.
Yep.
Any further comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. That motion carries. At this point, we will have Chief Weifels.
You got two more that were pulled.
Oh, I'm sorry, we do. Municipal Utilities Commission minutes for August 12th. Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been getting some phone calls about the windmill that isn't functioning, and I'm wondering if we will be getting any reports on them. We used to get them in our email, and I could refer those answers to the people that called me, but who would have the answer to that?
Do we have an answer to that? I honestly don't. I don't have an answer to it.
There's one that hasn't been functioning for quite some time, and I drive by it almost daily, and then people call me, and I hear about it at the HRA board several times. And
I guess the last update I had on it was a couple weeks ago. I haven't gotten a current update as far as what the actual problem is or why they haven't been able to get it back functioning. So I can follow up on that, Councilman, and get it.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
With that, I'll move to approve the utilities minutes. Unless Mr. Dockin has a question.
I do.
Councilman Docker.
As you know, I've asked that question a number of times when I've sat in for Councilmember DeBleek, and the answer that I typically get is that it meets the protocol or the standards that's been set. And my question would be, maybe we need to increase that standard or that protocol, because when the wind is blowing, we ought to take advantage of it and use those wind turbines. It is very frustrating to a number of citizens in our city that see those turbines standing still. So anyway, that's my comment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? And we have a motion on the table to approve the Municipal Utilities Commission minutes for August 12th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That motion carries. And then the Planning Commission minutes for August 14th.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question on item 3, the Nelson rezoning. That states that there was a motion made and which passed to deny the request to rezone the property, but yet in the attachment it still states that attachment A, it still says that they approved the rezoning and forwarded it to the council for ordinance and public hearing and adoption. Is that a typo, or what is the recommendation there from?
Staff recommendation from the city planner, Ms. DeShepper, was to approve the rezoning, and the Planning Commission, following their public hearing and discussion, made a motion to deny it. A little background on that. This property is adjacent to the Valley Golf Course. It's a good-sized residential property with a very large home that it'd be a very large home for a single family, let's put it that way. Nonetheless, it is in an area that's zoned for only single-family homes. The owners wish to rezone it to have it be eligible for a duplex, upper and lower. There were several neighbors that showed up at the hearing and requested that the rezoning not be made. The golf course itself is zoned R2. There's quite a bit of R2 property to the south of this property, and really there's very little meaningful difference between an R1 and an R2 neighborhood from a practical evaluation. I'm guessing there are probably some duplexes in single-family neighborhoods right now that we just flat out aren't aware of, and that's going to happen in a community with as many residential units as we have. That being said, the Planning Commission reviewed the comprehensive plan to assist them in making their decision. The comprehensive plan shows that area as suitable for low-density residential. It does not specify single-family. And the reason that they rejected it then was of spot zoning, because it would just be one lot that would be rezoned. Even though this lot is adjacent to the entire golf course that is zoned R2, which is connected to the Welshire addition and several other neighborhoods that are also zoned R2. So it's not going to be an island of R2. It would just be one R2 home that's attached to a much larger area that's zoned R2. Nonetheless, the Planning Commission did recommend that the rezoning be denied. Now, at this point, I think the council's got two choices. You can either accept the decision of the Planning Commission, or under the charter, you have the authority with 5 votes to refer it back to the Planning Commission, or to introduce an ordinance to rezone it on your own.
Mr. Mayor, my reason for bringing it up was just a clarification on why it's wrote one way in the minutes and a different way in another spot as to what actually happened. I think the Planning Commission made the right decision on this here, that you don't want to have, as they say, an island with one property in the middle of R1 properties, and the fact that this property was recently purchased by the Nelson. They were fully aware that it was zoned R1.
I can't speak to that fact.
So, in the anticipation that they could change zoning, and is quite an assumption on if that was the assumption given to them by the realtor or whatever. But I think the Planning Commission made a proper zoning decision with it, and their recommendation was proper. I was just need some clarification as to why it's wrote one way in the minutes and another in another part of the same minutes. So,
again, it's unfortunately because they don't always accept staff's recommendation.
okay, that clarifies it. So, that, Mr. Mayor, motion to accept the Planning Commission report.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the Planning Commission minutes for August 14th, 2013. Is there any discussion, further discussion? Councilman
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, was going to pull these minutes for that same reason. As they had called me, the Nielsen's were out of town when the meeting was held, actually out of the state. And Bruce, you mentioned that that lot would be an island, and it technically would not be an island of R2. It would be a peninsula, because the whole golf course is zoned R2. It would be a peninsula coming off of the R2, just as Welshire Addition is an R3 or 4 coming off of that same area, going from R2 to R4. And I'm sure that I know that there are houses in R1 zones that rent to college kids in the basement. They exist. They have since I went to school back in the day. And I see the Nielsen's are here tonight, and would it be proper for them to express any concerns, or would the council be willing to send it back to the Planning Commission for further review so they could attend the meeting?
I'll leave that up to the council.
Well, I'll make that motion.
We already have a motion on the
There's already a
floor.
motion on the table.
Point of order.
Well, can I amend the motion?
Is there a second? Question, wouldn't it be up to the mayor if he wants to allow them to speak?
That would be, but approving minutes would be hard sell to dream up an amendment to approving minutes. For a second motion, you can do what you want, Mayor, in control of a meeting to have them come and speak. That's not what I'm addressing.
So, excuse me, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Technically, I can't even make a motion to that effect then. That would be sent back because of the motion on the table.
If it's defeated.
You can get them to...
Unless we defeat the motion on the table.
or table the issue would override that one.
Mayor Yanis, just point of clarification, can they go back and apply again, or?
Can they what?
I mean, can they go back and apply again? The motion on the floor is to approve the minutes, so.
The motion on the floor is to approve the minutes, yes.
Yeah, But if we approve the minutes, can they go back and reapply if they want to?
I don't think so.
Our ordinance specifies that if a zoning action is denied, there's a specified length of time, I believe, within which they cannot reapply. In this particular case, if it's sent back to the Planning Commission, even though the hearing's been held and closed, I suspect it would be okay for the Planning Commission to reevaluate their decision. Again, there's a protocol for doing that as well at the Planning Commission level, but it seems kind of unusual to make them go back and reapply, being the matter's this fresh and we've got other ways of dealing with the situation.
So what does the council wish to do?
Mr. Scott.
Mr. Mayor, I can perhaps offer a little clarification on this, too.
Okay.
As I understand it, the motion on the floor is to simply accept the minutes from the Planning Commission.
So that's right.
I don't believe that forecloses the council from exercising its overriding power of the Planning Commission under Charter. Under Charter, you have 30 days from the first meeting after which you're presented with the minutes to exercise that power. So you can simply accept the minutes, but you still have, as a council, the authority to exercise that overriding power if you so desire.
And how would we do that?
You do that in a separate motion after the minutes are accepted.
Council Lady.
Can we just ask the Planning Commission, can we make a motion after we approve the minutes, just to ask the Planning Commission to look at it again?
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve the minutes for the Planning Commission for August 14th, 2013. Is there any discussion, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Councilman Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion that we send this back to the Planning Commission so that the Nielsen's may attend and they can just review it. That's my motion.
Second. Second?
Yes.
The motion has been made and seconded to send the minutes back to the Planning Commission so that the Nielsen's may attend. Is there any discussion? Councilman Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we appoint these people to the Planning Commission to do a job. They did the job. So I don't know why we're questioning them. I received many calls because it's in my ward and the neighbors do not want that rezoned. You know, they got duplexes north, 23rd, about a block, 2 blocks. There's more further to the northeast. And like Ron said, there's plenty around golf course on the southwest side.
We do have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what you're saying, Rick. I just think that they were unable to attend because they were, you know, traveling out of state per prior plans, and I just, I don't think the Planning Commission, I don't think it would be a great inconvenience if they reheard the matter and so that the applicant could appear.
Can I just, so if you go to court and you don't show up, does the judge say that? We're going to let you have a new hearing when you're available?
If you had notice, you know. I don't know if they had notice, you know, when their application went in. It hasn't been, I don't know those facts. I couldn't tell from the minutes what happened, but I mean, you know, if you didn't get notice, then maybe you should have another chance. But if they had notice and made an election, obviously that may influence the Planning Commission.
Any further discussion? Councilman Anderson?
I just want to be clear. The only reason we're sending it back is because we want them to have the opportunity to talk. Are we saying that we're not supporting the Planning Commission's decision? I mean, I'm kind of perplexed. As Councilman Fagerly says, we appoint these folks to do that job. Now, if they want to talk to the Planning Commission, then the Planning Commission feels the same way. Yes, that's okay. I'm a little bit reluctant to send it back.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Do we have to have a withdrawal of the second?
I believe yes.
I'll withdraw the second.
So we will add the Planning Commission minutes for the August 14th, 2013. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no.
No, we already did that.
That was done.
There was a follow-up motion, withdrawn, there's no motion.
There's no motion.
To vote on.
Okay, now we will move into this scheduled hearing for the ordinance amending Chapter 10, offenses and miscellaneous provisions. Article 2, dangerous weapons, Section 1054, discharge of firearms, and adopting new Section 1055, shooting a bow and arrow within city limits. Chief, would you like to address that, please?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what you have before you tonight is a change to the existing ordinance, which is entitled dangerous weapons. Initially, when this came before you, there was a request, two separate requests that applied to the same ordinance. The first request was to lengthen the time of a permit to shoot past the validity of a permit from 90 days, or I'm sorry, 60 days to 180 days. The second part of that request was to consider whether or not you wanted language addressing the ability to shoot a bow and arrow within the city limits of Willmar. The direction came back to go out and investigate other towns, other communities, and see what they had. That was done. I found that there was a wide range of law or ordinance that is in place. Some towns have absolutely no regulation. Many towns prohibit it totally of any type. And then there are some happy mediums in between. Knowing that Willmar is unique and knowing that we do value the input of our public, a request was put on Facebook for public input. It was viewed by 2,600 people. I did receive feedback from members of the archery club and feedback from other citizens as well. The feedback was universally split, some in favor, some not in favor, and varying degrees in between as well. The ordinance before you, as far as the bow and arrow ordinance is concerned, or that portion of the ordinance, is rather permissive. If you look at it closely, you'll see it regulates two things. It does regulate the type of arrow being shot within the city limits of Willmar, that if you use a broadhead, or what's known as a razor-tipped arrow, or a arrow that is designed, usually they use it when they fish, so once the arrow is stuck into the object, it can't be withdrawn easily. Those types of arrows would not be shot outside unless it was in an approved hunting situation, and that is covered under this ordinance. Otherwise, the thought was if a person's practicing with them in the backyard, should a bystander or next-door neighbor get hit inadvertently by an arrow, the damage to the person is much greater, and the cause of death, especially on the use of a razor arrow, is much greater. The other thing that was addressed was simply the backstop at which people use to place their targets in front of. And that size, which in the ordinance initially started off with 4 sheets of plywood, what was felt to be adequate size was probably 8 feet high and 12 feet wide. Knowing that plywood comes in 4-foot sections, it seemed kind of silly to buy a sheet and cut it in half. Therefore, it was just 4 by 16. That's where those measurements came from. That being said, however, halfway through the design of this ordinance, that was changed so it wouldn't have to be 3/4-inch plywood. The whole idea behind this ordinance is to make sure that arrows do not fly through a backstop and hit somebody on the other side. So it doesn't matter if the backstop is made out of heavy canvas that does not allow penetration of the arrow, or at least for the arrow to pass through it, earth and embankment, plywood, whatever a person so wishes to use, just as long as the backstop is of that size where your target is placed in front of it in the horizontal and vertical center. That being said, nothing else in that ordinance would stop a person from shooting bow and arrow within the city limits of Willmar. Many other communities or prohibit it entirely, even in settings such as schools and institutions that have an archery program, etc. Some communities only allow it indoors. This community would allow it indoors, and it would also allow it outdoors as long as the person has an approved backstop. Some communities allow it outdoors, but then the council has to approve the archery range that it's on. And I think that leads us into a lot of selectivity and takes the council to an area that they don't want to go to have to examine every range that somebody might want to construct in their backyard and give approval. So we've kind of ended up with what you see before you. One other change that was made between when this was initially brought to your attention as a final document was one word under 1054 where it says discharge of firearms. Our city attorney, who had a watchful eye, noticed that the old language that's been in place for the last 25 years said nothing in this article shall be construed to embrace. That word has been changed to prohibit. The way it was read before, we should have never had pest permits or anything else in the past. In other words, the way the language was written, it would have disallowed anything that we have been allowing for the last 25 years. I believe that this was an error that was not caught 25 years ago, and under his watchful eye, it was corrected, and I'm asking for that change as well.
Thank you. At this point, I will open the public hearing for the people that may want to speak to this ordinance. Are there anyone that would like to speak to this ordinance? Go ahead. Name and address.
You need to come to the mic. Thank you.
I'm Rick Schwantes. I live at 1503 Country Club Drive. And I tell you, things that you just said are great. I mean, I agree with some of the corrections. I mean, the broadhead issue, I can live with that. I can go shoot my broadhead somewhere else. But the rest of it, the backstop issue, I don't see that. I mean, aren't you going to get just as many complaints when I've got this 8 by 16 foot monstrosity in my backyard and leave it sit there? Because when you get something that big, you're not moving it around. And I even go to the length that that shouldn't be, for me, wouldn't be the determinant. Even if I had that and when the neighbors were in the backyard, I wouldn't be shooting because it's still not a safe situation. I've shot my bow in the city limits for 35 years. But there's situations where the neighbors are out, there's somebody around or whatever. I don't shoot. There's another time that I can shoot. I just bide my time and find opportunities that work. There is no good alternative in Willmar for somewhere to go and shoot. There is the range, and I know that'll be brought up, but that indoor range is not the range that you're going to go to practice, get ready for the hunting season. There's no elevation. It's straight on. The lighting is all the same. It is not a good alternative. It's a great alternative for somebody to go in and get used to their equipment, practice shooting. If they want to do a target shoot type situations like the range is set up for it, that's all great. But if you're a true hunter and you're an archery hunter, you need to practice under the conditions you're going to be shooting from. Light conditions, wind conditions, elevations, all of those things enter into it. And I can understand the safety issues, but I also say, hey, there's a lot of safety issues with a lot of other things around. And I wanted to come here and just say, I ask you to forget about this. I really don't know where the situation came from. I've talked to so many different people, and I've never seen anything in the paper of an incident where something's happened with somebody shooting their bow. I've talked to all kinds of people that say the same thing. I'm not sure where this came from to get it started. I understand there are people that are not safety conscious, but there's people like that with everything. There's people driving cars that probably shouldn't have a driver's license. But thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Did you have a comment to make? Please come up to the podium.
I would like to piggyback on the gentleman there.
And your name and address, I'm sorry?
Bruce Schreiner, 1411 10th Street, Southwest Willmar. To piggyback on the gentleman, we as an archery club and archers, we pretty much regulate ourselves. We don't go out and just, fling arrows all over the place. I shoot in town, and if there's somebody outside, I live in Southwest Willmar, there's somebody outside, I don't shoot. It's plain and simple. Or I go down to the range. But, as he said, being able to get the quality shot, the quality experience, we need room, okay? But again, we try to self-regulate ourselves as much as we can. We're a very safe sport. We are just hoping that you allow us to shoot. We thank you very much as a club for bringing this up, this ordinance, and also for a chance to speak. But by and large, like I said, I live in Southwest Willmar, and there's only two of us that I know of from First Street all the way out to Billtown Stadium that I've seen shoot. It's not like it's every person or every other person is going to have these huge backstops up. I shoot into my shed, and there's another shed behind that. So I try to make it as safe as I can. Like I said, again, if somebody's outside, I don't shoot, or I go downtown to the range. Again, it's only 20 yards, but at least you can shoot. But then again, it's small. But, and having it in the backyard, you can, move around, get angles, a little elevation. But as I said, we try to keep it as safe as we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this? On this item? Okay, let's hold off on that just a minute. There's no more discussion on the bow and arrows, and then the okay. What do we need to do here, Kevin?
Close the
Hearing,
take action.
and then the
Close the
council
hearing.
discusses and takes action.
And the public hearing is closed, and we'll take action amongst the council here. If they have any questions or comments.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to table this issue for reconsideration and bring it back to committee.
I'll second that.
The motion has been made and seconded to table the issue and bring it back to the committee. Any further discussion? Councilman Anderson.
Thank you. Just a question for Councilman Rahman. Why? What additional information are you looking for?
Well, there's some information that I've been researching that I don't think the public is aware of, and I certainly was not aware of at the meeting. In 2012, in Chaska, there was a 16-year-old boy who was shot in the head and killed by his 16-year-old friend with a bow and arrow when he was riding his bicycle over to visit him. Roseville has banned, and Bloomington has banned all use of bow and arrows. A lot of other cities are in the process of doing that too. The move is to not allow discharge in the city limits. An arrow can travel 250 feet in 1 second. That's the maximum. That's a long ways. Even if it's a target arrow, it can still travel that far. My concern at the committee meeting was, which I voted against the issue, was that I didn't feel comfortable with the thought of somebody discharging a dangerous weapon, and I'm outside in my backyard, and I hear this thunk, thunk. It's intimidation. what would you do? You certainly wouldn't be very comfortable sitting in your backyard enjoying some time with your grandkids or your kids. There would be that sense of uneasiness. So I think there's some other considerations that we can do. Also, other cities have a 8-foot by 8-foot backdrop rather than a 8-foot by 16-foot backdrop. But they also have a buffer zone of 250 feet from the target area to any adjoining landowner's property. There's other information on it. And I just think it's something that is dangerous, but then it all depends on who using it, and then it's caused by called an accident. There's another ordinance that I saw that was a designed area in which arrows are shot at a fixed target, which has either a backstop target area of 8 foot by 8 foot, but also the buffer zone of 250 feet from the target to any adjoining property owners. There's other cities that had a 60-foot width by 90-foot depth, and that was a compromise for target shooting. And also, that was contingent on the distance from the adjoining property owners. Also, I did talk to a couple of people on the archery group that have been instrumental in letting us draft this ordinance with the help of the police chief. And it wasn't my idea, it was Mr. Bruce Peterson's idea, who said, why don't we have a range out at the old wastewater treatment plant? I mean, archery is a sport. It's in the Olympics. It would be good for kids to get outside, turn off the TV, and do something different. Maybe a compromise in this case would be to do that. Allow the archery group or a group of citizens to maintain that area, and we designate it for archery range only. Then people would have a place to bring their families out in a safe setting without intruding on the neighbors. So that's the reason why I offered the motion.
Thank you.
Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I seconded it because I thought maybe we could talk about the size of the backdrop, shrinking it. I differ from you, Steve. I do believe that they should be allowed to shoot in their backyards, and there isn't too many people that are, like he said, he only knows 2 of them between Southwest Willmar and whatever that are shooting bow and arrows in the yards. So, I just think that backdrop is too big.
You can withdraw your second.
With that, I will withdraw my second. Yeah, thank you.
I'll second it.
A motion has been made and seconded to table the issue.
Refer it back to.
Refer it back to the committee.
Isn't that what it was?
Yes.
Well,
We just to table the matter.
Table.
yeah, I think we need clarification to table the matter or to refer it back to committee, because to table it would mean to just lay it on the side, and to refer it back to the committee is a different action. So maybe Councilmember could clarify.
I would like to revise that to refer this issue back to committee. And if I could get a second.
You have a second? Second. The motion has been made and seconded to refer the matter back to the committee. And which committee is that?
Public Works.
Public Works. Is there any further discussion? Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll defer back to the committee. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no.
No.
That motion carries. And now we will go into the presentation by the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities Report, 2013 legislative session and activities. Mr. Flaherty.
Mayor and members of the council, thank you for allowing me to make a brief presentation tonight. My colleague, Mr. Dorman, is distributing the 2013 legislative session report. I'd like to go through this and also talk about, I know some of you have concerns about membership in the coalition, and I'd like to present some information and have some discussion about that also. So let's let's get started. The background of the coalition is that it's an association of 84 greater Minnesota cities. Willmar was one of the founding members in the early 70s and has been an active participant since then. The CGMC is governed by a geographically diverse board of directors. And if you look on the back of what we just passed out, the board of directors is listed on the left. You'll know that your city administrator, Charlene Stevens, has been a member of the board, is a member of the board, and I want to thank her for her service. I also want to thank the mayor for his participation in some of the coalition events that we've had in the city here when we meet with legislators. He's been there when we met with the paper to discuss local aid and other issues. He's been there with us, so that's what makes the coalition such a strong and effective organization. The coalition contracts with Flaherty and Hood for legislative services. Now, I'm Tim Flaherty. I've done this for 29 years with the coalition. It's I can talk a lot about it from a historical perspective if you like. Dan Dorman is our most recent employee. He's a former legislator from Albert Lee. He was also Economic Development Authority Executive Director there. And he is providing services to the CGMC and to a new organization called the Greater Minnesota Economic Development Partnership, which we will discuss briefly a little later. But both Dan and I will be, will be available for questions here, and I thought he might be able to add a perspective, a legislator's perspective to the issue. This is the mission of the CGMC. It's to advocate for state policies that foster strong cities through economic growth and good local government. And I can explain those things in some detail over the years of the many, many laws we've passed that have saved cities money and reduced unnecessary regulations at the state level. The reasons for CGMC success are really three major ones, and this is contained, and there's one page in the packets there that talks about active membership, and of course there we have not only have a strong board, but we have a lot of our members coming to the Capitol, doing lobbying with information we provide them, and participating in the committees and testifying and things like that, and going to media press conferences and things. So we've had very strong participation from the members, both city officials and city managers. And then we have professional and technical assistance that is by far the best in the state. We have an analyst who has a property tax model, which we developed very early on in the 80s. To give legislators, let legislators know what the impact of various decisions that they were considering. And we also have a media expert who helps us get our word out to the public. Membership has grown back. Now, I wasn't with the coalition in 1979, but this is as far back as we really have good records. And you can see there are 28 member cities then. In 2013, right now there's 84, and that's up a little bit. You can see that there was a slight dip as we hit the recession, and that's going up. So the organization is strong. It's growing. Duluth was the last larger member that joined, and they had never been a member in the past. The focus of CGMC is very, well, it doesn't look narrow, but it is very narrow. It doesn't do a lot of the things that other organizations do, like the League of Cities. We focus on these areas. We have, now things can be added or subtracted from this list, but these are the typical things that we do. Local government aid and property taxes, and there I have been the lead person on that. Bradley Peterson is working with me a lot on that, and Chris Henjum is our analyst. The economic development area, we have Dan, who's here, and Mike Miller. Annexation and land use is mostly handled. It's not a big issue right now, but it has been in the past. and that's Bradley Peterson. Environmental regulation, which always seems to be a difficult issue, is Elizabeth Wayful in our office. And transportation, which again you'll hear is heating up for next year in a very significant way, and we have an excellent lobbyist there. Now these people serve the coalition, but they're not. It's not like they do it full time, like Amanda would have other clients in transportation in some other areas. But that's where the efficiency, I think, comes in for the way we provide services. The 2012, now we're going to talk about the session and really what happened during the session. And it's, you know, over the, 29, 30 years I've done this, this is probably one of the most significant sessions and significant for Greater Minnesota in terms of going forward. The election returns, of course, changed control of the legislature to Democratic. So both houses and the governor were DFL, which I don't ever remember happening, maybe a long time ago, but it just doesn't happen. The challenges that were faced really by the legislature and the governor was they had over a $600 million deficit, which, of course, you can't have a deficit going forward, so they'd have to solve that. Everybody that campaigned in both parties, and the governor said they would pay back the school shift, the money they borrowed from the schools the year before. And it seemed like everybody was upset about the property tax increases that had happened, particularly on Greater Minnesota businesses, which was where the biggest tax increases had fallen the previous year. So those were kind of the challenges going into 2013. Our goals, and we set goals every year and then we measure up at the end. Have we met those goals or haven't we? For state fiscal responsibility, which has been probably the most frustrating thing for all of the mayors, and certainly people in my firm who worked on this, to see the state carry an inadequate reserve, to have an unallotment law, which means they take the money to you after they've promised it to you, has been very frustrating. So we've been harping on this now the last couple of years about state fiscal responsibility. So we were really saying you've got to balance the state budget without gimmicks and without shifting the problem onto property taxes, which is one of the things that frequently happened over the last 10 years. Second goal is to reform and add revenue to LGA funding, and of course that helps hold down and reduce property taxes in many, many cases. Then reform and add revenue to LGA funding to reduce property tax. I just said that. Then the last point, the last goal was to ensure a fair share of dollars in those three areas: transportation, economic development, and bonding. And really, the state decided to spend money this last year. As you know, they raised taxes and they were going to spend money. So our goal was to make sure that we would get a fair shake of that money that they were spending. And we can talk more about that, but I think it's very clear we accomplished those goals. So let's look at what happened in LGA. The governor was committed to reform. He set up a working group with mayors all over the state, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the bigger regional centers and the smaller cities were represented on that. The governor's budget then included an $80 million increase in LGA. Now, we were lobbying for a $100 million increase in local aid, but $80 million increase in LGA was a significant step in the right direction, was our view. The Department of Revenue developed a new formula for distributing the local government aid money. We thought the formula was not adequately addressing the needs in Greater Minnesota. In fact, we thought it was very much skewed towards the metro area. So we did a lot of educational materials and graphs that showed people why it wasn't fair. Even the metro people, we showed why it wasn't fair. Greater Minnesota only received $8 million of that $80 million in the property tax relief under the governor's proposal. And frankly, it wasn't going to pass. So what happened was Davnie is the representative in the House who is chair of the House Property Tax Division. He called us together and other city groups, and I'll tell you who those city groups were. They were Minneapolis, which is kind of considered a city group of itself, St. Paul, the same, the metro cities, which is all the suburbs plus Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's the metro cities group. It's comparable to the CGMC. So it was really, and the League of Cities was invited to these meetings. And we met for, geez, it was like 2 months of very intense meetings. We have an analyst. We have a tremendous data capability in our office. This is the hallmark of the coalition since I started working for it, was that we have better and faster and more accurate information than anybody. And that's still true today. So when it came down to, we have a proactive organization. We don't just say no to the governor's proposal. We say there's a better way to do it, and we come up with alternatives. So we made many, many alternatives to ways that we think would be fair to divide up this roughly $500 million of local aid. So we proposed those. We went through those. The negotiation went something like this. Minneapolis and St. Paul did very, very well, exceedingly well under the governor's proposal, like off the charts. The suburbs did very well. Greater Minnesota did very poorly. The range cities did poorly. Other cities, I'll show you numbers for Willmar in a minute, did very poorly. So the negotiation was largely between us and the metro area. We represented Greater Minnesota. Actually, the small cities weren't there, but we did take into consideration their problems because they're important to us too. But so that's what happened, and basically this, around the Capitol they were saying, well, we'll either keep the funding level we have now and let the current formula go into operation, the old LGA formula, which everybody agrees was not fair, or you guys have to agree on something. So the legislators put it on us to agree on something. Now, most of them never thought we could agree on anything, but it was really what happened here was we developed and promoted a kind of a breakthrough concept in LGA. That was developed by our research people. We did that. Nobody else did that. You could call the league or ask anybody in House Research Department, the objective staff, they'd say, we did that. And the breakthrough was very important because we were listening to our mayors that said, look, stability from year to year is important in our budgets. And I think I've been here before and I've heard that from some of the council here too. So it was very important. So we looked at the way they were doing LGA and we said, well, if stability is important, then what we should do is let everybody have the amount they had before, the year before, and move towards what you're supposed to get under the formula, which is the you take what a city needs and you subtract out what they can raise locally from property taxes, and that's their LGA. But the state never has enough money to fund that. So we said, well, we'll do that formula and we'll set it so that each year now in the future you'll move between what you got the previous year and what you would get in the future if they paid for the full, what they call the gap, which is the need minus the effort thing. So each year, now some cities will get more, you know, if you appropriate $20 million next year, some cities will go up faster than others. But almost all the cities will go up. A few cities are being phased out. There's only 2 coalition cities out of the 85 that, well, they won't be phased down to 0, but they'll be phased down a little bit over a number of years. So all the other cities will have the stability of knowing they'll get what they had last year plus a little bit more. Now, the key to this was the formula was unfair to the suburbs. So we agreed and we found a way to make it so that the suburbs will get, you know, a city like Willmar might get a 5% increase, but a suburban city might get an 8% increase. And that's because historically some of them had not been treated fairly. And we all looked at the data and we figured this out. We figured out which ones should go up faster and how you, because it is very important that we have support from suburban legislators. If we don't, then they'll all say it's a bad formula, eliminate the program. We wanted to fix the program for the next 10 years, and I think we did. I think now we have everybody there, whether it's the small cities, the suburban cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and our cities, we're all saying, okay, it's a fair formula. So now all we have to do is try to get additional funding each year, which I think should be doable. So we came up with this breakthrough idea. I was a little bit surprised, frankly, that other cities and that legislators accepted it. They said, yes, this is a good idea. I was a little surprised at that, but they did, and that's how we got the agreement for the LGA. So the LGA outcome was we had a new formula which is more stable. Everybody agrees that. It's a lot simpler, and it's a lot more fair. And so we have agreement on that, plus we had the $80 million increase in the base LGA, which was evenly split. Remember how I said the governor's plan was 8 out of 80? Well, this one was evenly split. 40 out of $80 million would go to greater Minnesota cities. So we proposed good solutions, and the important thing is we did have bipartisan support from the greater Minnesota legislators. You're not going to get 100 support all the time from everybody, but I think it was important that we reached out and got people to understand why it was a good formula and that it would be good moving forward. Here's what Willmar looks like. You can see the certified 2013 there is the $4,052,000. The next bar graph there, it shows what would have happened if the legislature had never met. If you were just using the same funding for LGA, they didn't change the formula, you would have gotten $3,856,000. The governor's formula phased in, which would have taken many years, would have you a little increase, $4,102,000, but the governor's formula never could have passed. That's the thing that you should know, because there wouldn't have been support from it. There were way too many cities that lost money. So it never could have passed. So really, we probably would have been under that old law scenario until we found that agreement. And the agreement, you can see with the new LGA, provides you with $4,439,000. So I would say, I mean, if I were looking at this, I would, from a city's perspective, I would say, well, that's a benefit to our city. We can use that difference between the old law and the new law, which is about $600,000, I think. We can either use that for critical spending, or we can cut property taxes with it. You get to decide, except there is a small levy limit for 1 year. But I mean, it's a very good thing. Plus, we've set the direction going the right way. Now, there were other things in the tax bill. Some of them good, some of them not so good. The only thing I'll mention, because I think people get tired of listening to this, is that the city and counties no longer pay a sales tax. Well, that'll be coming effective in the future here, but and that should be a savings to the city too. The fact that you don't have to pay state sales tax. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer on that. So, okay. Transportation, we had quite a lot of discussion this session. They talked about doing a metro sales tax, a half-cent metro sales tax to fund light rail transit. Now, they want to do about an $8 billion, and I said B with a B, billion, $8 billion light rail system in the metro. And so the thinking was they put a half-cent metro sales tax in there. That would raise a lot of money. And the greater Minnesota legislators on their own really understood this, that if you did that without addressing highway needs in greater Minnesota, we'd never get any funding for highways. So, and in fairness to the chairs of the transportation committees, which in the House and Senate are both chaired by Minneapolis legislators, they agreed with that they couldn't do a half-state transportation solution. So they didn't. So what ended up was, since the governor was against the gas tax increase, he was for the metro sales tax, but against the gas tax, there was a deadlock at the legislature, and everybody said, okay, we'll pick this up next year, which will be 2014, which is why I say I think it's going to be an issue in 2014, plus the fact that Commissioner of Transportation is going around the state trying to get support for some kind of a plan. But what they did instead was they maintained the current funding, so they didn't raise any taxes, but they did spend money. There's a big shock there. So what happened was they put $300 million from trunk highway bonds into a new program called Corridors of Commerce. And that's code word. That's for projects like Highway 23, like Highway 14. That's what that is. That's what it's meant to be for. Now, the Corridors of Commerce program is going to be very important in the next session. $300 million is like a drop in the bucket in this area. But the facts are, we now have a program there that, you know, if you're going to spend $700 million on light rail, we can say we want $700 million in Corridors of Commerce, which is basically for interregional corridors. They can be in the metro, but most of them are in greater Minnesota. And so that's the way that highways will, this will be a new thing that highways fund. And that, again, that was, a lot of that we worked on, and I think it was a good thing. Then, of course, to balance that out, they put in money for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail and $10 million for Greater Minnesota Transit. So I think these efforts should, if what you're concerned about Highway 23 or other transportation issues, I think clearly I would say from this, we got our fair share, plus we got a framework that's going to help us going forward. Environment is always a problem, the regulatory things. We have been working on this municipal lab certification, and we changed it to make the process simpler, less costly, and more efficient. This is something that the Greater Minnesota wastewater people and the water people that provide water, like your Public Works and that, this is something they wanted because the state was controlling it and not doing a very good job, frankly. And so we changed the process there and put more local control in it, and it's going to save money, I mean, year after year. The other thing we supported and I think seriously helped with was creating a Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission so that we can have a system to get more legacy money through that constitutional amendment thing. So those were kind of the major things that we did. Before we move into economic development, would there be any questions on the local aid or anything else I just talked about, like transportation? I mean, we'll have a time for questions at the end, but if there's any pressing question on those issues I've covered so far, I could take those now if you want. All right, then I'm moving forward. Last year we set up something called the Greater Minnesota Economic Development Partnership, and I decided, and there's many reasons for this, I'd love to talk about it for an hour, but we won't. We weren't being very effective on economic development at the Capitol, and that our budget didn't allow for it. We didn't work on it very much. The state was clear last session they were going to spend a lot of money on economic development, and they did. And so we were very concerned last year, and we said, well, we should do something. So what we did was we started like a committee of the coalition, and we got local businesses, 9 chambers of commerce, 19 economic development authorities, and 6 initiative foundations to join this effort. And it was amazingly successful. And my perception of things is that cities alone can't make the big difference. We need businesses engaged, businesses working with us to really get the economic development programs that we need. So what we did pass this year, we had a proposal for, I think, 5 items. They're really strong ideas, but we could only pass 2 of them, which I think we should be happy we passed 2. But we got an internship tax credit, which is a different concept than what the governor proposed, for example. And ours passed, but it's the idea of providing an incentive for a business to hire interns from our colleges and technical schools. Because what we found through some research was that we lose a lot of brain power. They graduate and then they leave and go either to another state or they go to the Twin Cities. And our theory is, which most of the businesses we talk to agree with us, and they will use this program, it's a way to get the students into the manufacturing and some of these businesses that we have, and it's like a trial period. And we think it will be very successful at keeping some of the these college and technical school graduates in our communities. And of course, we're going to need them for jobs that are available. The sales tax exemption for business expansions, we got $7 million a year for. That's very significant. The businesses we talked to last year said, look, if we're going to expand, we need some incentives, we need some help doing that. So they will get that sales tax exemption, which is our whole drift of this program is to try to get the businesses that we have to expand in our local communities. That's the drift of it, as opposed to trying to lure businesses from another state or from the Twin Cities. That's a long shot anyway. So having our own businesses expand is the focus of this rather major program we passed. The exciting news is Dan Dorman, who's here, has been named the Partnership Executive Director. So he's going to lead the partnership. We are now trying to grow the membership with chambers of commerce, with economic development authorities, and with individual businesses. And we are forming a board, a new board, which is going to include all of those. And we didn't list them all, but like the initiative funds were members last year, they'll be. But, you know, we've got a lot going on in greater Minnesota. There's a lot of business potential, and we're not focused. I mean, we've got a lot of different groups all over greater Minnesota, but we're not focused on what state policy will help us the best. The metro area is very focused. They've got a big organization of cities and counties and chambers and economic development professionals all pushing for programs and funding for the metro area. And I'm not faulting them. They should do that. But then we need to put our voice forward. So we're going to be developing in September and October some new bold programs that we're going to propose next year, along with some more modest programs that we can pass in 1 year. But I think we need to have a vision for greater Minnesota economic growth. It's going to include highway and infrastructure funding. It's going to include business incentives, and it'll probably include some tax policy issues. So that's going to be done through this, what we call the partnership, and it's Partnership for Economic Development in Greater Minnesota. Conclusion I draw is that we had a successful year in 2014. We accomplished really our goals. Resulted in a new formula and funding for LGA, which should be good for, like I say, the next 10 years. We need to advocate in 2014 for transportation. It's going to be a very short session. I think they go in like February 26th. It's going to be 10 weeks. I think transportation will be one of the key issues that people are going to try to deal with. And then the last thing in 2014, we're going to try to maintain and build this economic development effort. Upcoming events, we've got the Fall Conference in Alexandria, November 13th to 15th, where we set our policies. We have partnership regional meetings, which will be in September and October. So far, the locations are Bemidji, Duluth, Fergus Falls, Granite Falls, and Rochester. Legislative Action Day, where our members come and we have the legislators go to Mancini's, which is kind of a separate club in close, in St. Paul there, which legislators go to, and we have good attendance at. And then 2014 Summer Conference is going to be August 20th to 22nd, someplace in southern Minnesota. It's a very key conference because it's the year the governor is elected. And as some of you know, every election cycle, when the governor's election is up, we have a candidate forum for those governors at our summer conference. And they almost always come, and they are almost always very productive. So if any of you can set your dates for August 20th to 22nd, I think you'll be happy with attending that. Let's talk about Willmar's membership in the coalition. And I mean, this is from my perspective, but I'll give you that, and then we can take questions. Dan was a former legislator; he can tell you what it's like actually in the legislature. I don't actually know what it's. I mean, I know what it's like lobbying, but I don't know what it's like being a legislator. But the reason we I think you should be a member is the cities need a strong voice on state policy issues and distribution of state resources like LGA, like transportation funding. I mean, these are really important things for the health of our cities in greater Minnesota. Now, a recent research study, which was done by the Center for Rural Policy and Development, it just came out. It's called Finding the Voice of Rural Minnesota, and it was written by Tom Horner, and some of you probably remember he was a candidate for governor from the Independence Party, but he was the author of this report. And what they really found was that statewide organizations are ignoring rural Minnesota. Now, statewide organizations can mean many things. They did this survey and they did all these interviews, but my point in this is, and I wouldn't say the League of Cities ignores us, the Minnesota Chamber, I would just say that rural Minnesota is probably not their priority because they have membership statewide, and they, you know, the League was very helpful in this LGA thing, but their role was to be the neutral, the objective neutral. They couldn't take sides because, remember, the negotiation was between us, the suburbs, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. So they were divided. They couldn't, all they could do is, thank goodness they did, they stayed neutral and objective through the whole thing, but they were helpful. So I'm not saying that they're not helpful. I'm saying we have unique needs. We have ag and mining and manufacturing, and this is way different than the economic development in the metro area, which is way different kind of animal. So we can't count on anybody else to tell our story. We have to tell our story. We have to come up with the programs. We have to make the case to our own legislators, the greater Minnesota legislators, who are generally very glad that we're giving them information. And then we all have to try to convince the metro legislators that this is good for the whole state, which we sometimes do, like the LGA thing. Why should Willmar stay a member? Well, again, these are just continuation. Legislators need help understanding some of these complicated issues. I mean, no matter how good your legislator is, and we've had some very good legislators from rural Minnesota, but they turn over so frequently, and you get some very good people that come in. They need to, I mean, the state tax system is very complicated, believe it or not. So is the property tax system. So is local aid. So all of this stuff, so is transportation money. It's all very complicated. So we fill a very important void there by providing them good information. The other points I would just make, the metro interests are so close to the capital and have a significant geographic advantage. It is very hard for us to get organized. It doesn't take them any time to get together behind an $8 billion light rail proposal for their economic growth. No time at all. We're spread up in the northeast and the southwest and all over the place. It's hard to get people together behind, one thing. So the metro interests have a big advantage to start with. And they're very well-funded metro interests, whether you're talking about the public, lobbyists. I mean, we are, I think we do an excellent job, but I think, I'll tell you, like the mayor from Bemidji was just down at a transportation meeting this last week, and I had lunch with her after this meeting, and she said, I couldn't believe it. I mean, there were like 3 greater Minnesota people there and 35 metro. And that's kind of what we face, but I think we do a good job anyway. But I think there is so many people there, and if we don't step forward with what we need and dispute sometimes what they say, what other people say, other interest groups, even our own legislators start to believe it. For example, right now all the metro legislators are saying greater Minnesota, they cleaned up, they got all this money. We got all this LGA. So I say to them, well, what do you mean? We got half of the LGA. We didn't get all this LGA more than the metro. And then the sales tax exemption, they said, you got that. And I said, well, you actually got more money in that pot than we did. So I think, and then this education funding, they say, you got all this education money that was unfair out there in greater Minnesota. We finally got the analysis done, and it's only 50% of the money. So we can't, because even our legislators will start believing the Metro legislators, and they say, well, you got all the money, you shouldn't get any more. So I'm just saying that somebody's got to be around to actually get the facts and give the legislators the facts so that they can do a good job for you. While I'm on that point, I would say, just when I close here, that your legislators, that would be Senator Coonan and Representative Swatsky, were very strong supporters of our program this year. Now, we had a lot of strong support from Republicans and Democrats in Greater Minnesota, you know, all through Greater Minnesota. So, but nonetheless, I have to tell you that I think they worked hard for us. They used the information we gave them to advocate with their colleagues, and I think that's helpful. That's what we need everybody, all the legislators from Greater Minnesota to do. So, we think that CGMC benefits Willmar's taxpayers because we get a fair share of state resources, which I don't think we would get. And I could give you many other legislators and people that I think that would concur with that opinion. And we wouldn't be as effective without your participation and leadership. I mean, you're a major regional center. You're an important regional center. You are the big regional center in west central Minnesota. It is very important that you're a member. So I want to end just by saying we'll take questions, but thank you for your membership, and not just your membership, not just your dues, but for your participation. Both the mayor and Charlene were helpful and participated this year and helped make a difference. So that's my pitch. Now, I don't know if I can convince everybody, but I'd be willing to stay until after your meeting tonight, if any of you want to discuss this even longer. But to me, it's very important you're in the coalition, and I think it's a benefit to you, and it's a benefit to a lot of the other cities in Greater Minnesota. So that's the pitch. Dan Dorman could talk if you have a question about, you know, whether lobbying is worth it or what, you know, or whatever issue it is. But so could we take questions? Would that be?
That would be fine. Are there any questions from the council? Councilman Anderson.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. I'd like to hear Dan's perspective on just what you were saying. What is it like for a legislator and Greater Minnesota legislator, and how, if the coalition helped you when you were a legislator, and you know, just how that kind of went forward?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I'm Dan Dorman. I do live in Albert Lee, and am pleased to be here tonight. To answer your question, Councilor, what is it like? You know, it's a very confusing place at times because you are bombarded with a lot of different influences, a lot of different people trying to shape your opinion of matters. And what I can tell you is that, and I don't fault the metropolitan area, good for them for doing it, but they are in many ways better organized, particularly in the area of economic development, which is why I've taken this new position. But in terms of annexation, LGA, wastewater policy, there is no other Greater Minnesota resource out there to help us understand those issues. And Tim is exactly right. The caucuses, whether it's Republican or the Democrats, generally because leadership goes based on seniority, they tend to end up metropolitan folks in positions of leadership. So it's already very difficult to overcome that. But then when you look at the lobbying effort that they put on, both Minneapolis and St. Paul individually have lobbyists, plus they have a similar organization. If that's all the message that, you know, they keep getting hammered with, and our Greater Minnesota representatives keep getting hammered with, and there's no counter to it, they're going to be overrun. The Albert is currently represented by a Democrat. Prior to that was a Republican, and it's interesting. I spent a lot of time talking to him and trying to correct some of the misinformation, and that's a difficult task. Without the coalition, it'd be almost impossible. I mean, I think that the coalition has been successful and has been able to win so many issues at the legislature because necessarily they're nice guys. I think they are, but it's because of the quality of information, the database that Tim spoke of from a property tax standpoint to find out what are the implications of what's being proposed. I don't know of another resource out there that would have helped me make those decisions. If you've ever had the opportunity to go to the summer conference, there's kind of a wrap-up, and you'll see a lot of legislators that are retiring that get up and speak, and they talk about the coalition. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been paying particular attention to these speeches, and almost all of them talk about information, the information, and there is no other source for that. And that I think is probably the strongest reason that you ought to continue your membership. And it isn't just LGA. And even though annexation hasn't been a major issue in a while, the reason it hasn't been a major issue is the coalition has beat back some things that you wouldn't like. Sometimes playing defense is just as important as a strong offense, and the coalition has done, I think, a very good job from a city perspective on land use and annexation issues, which are maybe not as glamorous as tax issues, depending on how you look at that, but are very important to how you run your city, the challenges that you face. And so from a legislator's perspective, invaluable. The information prepared me to be able to be a better legislator.
Yeah, I have a question, if I may. Is that how many total cities are there in Minnesota?
Total cities in Minnesota? I don't know, 347, but that's a guess. Yeah, I don't know, but it's probably pretty close. It would, it would depend. You know, some of those are going to be 100 people, and yeah, I don't know.
One of our council people. Go ahead.
What the league puts out is 857, and that there are 830 cities that belong to the League of Minnesota Cities. Right. That's the data that I work off.
Right.
857 cities in Minnesota.
850, and they should all belong to the league. Frankly, I wouldn't tell you shouldn't belong to the league just for the insurance trust, which is why, frankly, most of the cities do belong to the League of Minnesota Cities. I'm not against them, but that insurance trust that they operate is probably the cost to not be a member of the League of Minnesota Cities would be astronomical if you had to go out and insure yourself. So, but they are different organizations. League of Minnesota Cities really has urban, suburban, and greater Minnesota members. They really don't get into I don't say the fights, but they really have a hard time advocating for a particular program or not a particular program. Not every greater Minnesota city is a member, for sure. There's a small cities organization that's out there. This would not be the right organization for them. But I think as you flip back in the charts a little bit, you'll see that the membership, even during the bad times, only waned a little bit, and now it's back up to, I don't think there's ever been any more members. There's never been more members than there are now of the coalition. And so are there some that don't belong and let others carry the water for them? Sure. That's the other way to look at that. Depends how you feel about that. You know, I would say that you want to carry your own share of the burden rather than somebody else. And so that's another way, I guess, to look at that. But not every member is a city, or a city is a member, and nor should they be.
Any other questions from the council? Councilman Allen?
Well, thanks for being here. This came up at our budget meeting. So great you came out today. It's always good to get an update of what you're doing. Sure. Just some thoughts as I was listening to this, and local government aid has been talked about, well, 30 years?
Probably since the inception of the program, absolutely, yep.
At what point does it end? You know, we finally now have, thanks to you and a lot of other people, we have a formula that isn't too bad. I mean, it's better than what we had before. All the time that you, us, city staff have to lobby, isn't there some way we can make this more permanent at the state level? I know they have their budget based on a biennium. It was every 2 years. But it seems to me that there's a lot of redundancy and wasted effort on the fact of local government aid. Either they're going to have it or they're not going to have it. This bickering between what formula is good and what formula is bad is just ridiculous. And most people elected, I would assume, would have a very simple, honest approach to being fair with everybody, but protect the small cities and outstate because they are the backbone of our state. Metropolitan can get by either way.
Right.
But I know you have a difficult battle there, but that's just one of my points. And how long is it going to remain? Well, there was talk that it was going to be eliminated years ago. I don't think that would be a good idea at all. But I think the only way it can be done, getting back to my first point of the permanent formula, so that we have leverage from the outstate area to the metropolitan and larger suburbs of Minneapolis, is to redistrict the state of Minnesota so that people, and this would be a major undertaking, but my thought is it should be simple. Redistrict it so the representatives also represent areas out here. It could be pied up any way you want. So they can't say they're just a metropolitan representative. They're going to be responsible for us out here all the way to the South Dakota border. If that could be pied up, and the way it's tied up right now, it's all politics, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and who has the most amount of votes in this town and that town, shouldn't make any difference. You should win on your own merit. I think that would be a big challenge. It would be almost maybe impossible to get done, but it's just a thought, and I had to share it with you. It seems just kind of like common sense.
Right. What seems like common sense to us out here sometimes doesn't seem like common sense to sometimes metropolitan legislators, I guess is the first thing I'd say. Is it going to be a permanent program? I'm more optimistic today than I was a year ago because of the changes that were made to the formula. Part of the reason that some of the suburbs will look like they're going to do better than us in the next few years, even though we'll do okay, is the fact that during Governor Palente's era and the cuts were made, the way those cuts were made as a percentage of levy plus aid, it zeroed out a lot of the lower wealth suburbs. And frankly, that wasn't very fair. You know, that's not our job to point that out, but in some ways we do because we want them in the program, because I think the best way to make sure that this is a long-term stable program is going to be judged on the strength of the formula itself. Last year, the governor's formula that the Department of Revenue came up with after these meetings that were held, they'll tell you it was statewide, but it was dominated by metro influence. That wasn't too good for us. Of the $600,000 that will come to Willmar next year, had the coalition not been there, $300,000 of that would have went to St. Paul, and another $300,000 of it would have went to Minneapolis. Not anti-Minneapolis or St. Paul. They're doing all fine on their own. They don't need folks like us to go down and help them. They're doing okay. However, that's where that money would have went. The same amount of dollars would have been spent. It would have just been allocated differently and not in our favor. So how do we keep the program sustainable? And I think that is to continue to, if there are problems in the formula, address the formula in a non-political fashion to say what makes sense, and let the statisticians guide that more than the politicians, and we end up with a better formula. When we've had problems with the formula in the past, it's because there have been arbitrary decisions made on how to cut it, and that always creates problems. And I worried about that. You know, why would I care about the suburbs? Well, I care about them because if they're really entitled to participate in this program and they're locked out, they're never going to support it. They're going to want to line item it. And there are groups that do. If you ask the Minnesota Chamber, they would tell you to get rid of the whole program. I'll also tell you that most states that I know of have revenue sharing programs in one way or another, depending on what they're called. In fact, the metropolitan area itself has a revenue sharing program called fiscal disparities, which accomplishes much of the same thing for certain areas. And so revenue sharing isn't a unique idea to Minnesota, but it is an understanding of we do need vibrant cities all over the state. You know, we're not ever going to be. I used to argue on education things. It seems to me when I graduated from Alberta High School, you had a choice of 3 languages, Spanish, German, or French. Now we're down to Spanish. You go to Edina, they've got 15 different foreign languages they offer. I don't say we have 15, but it does seem like we ought to figure out a way that every high school in the state could have 3. And this is kind of the same thing. Is we may not look like suburbs as far as the amenities that we offer. That's okay. If we like those, sell your house and move to the suburbs, right? But I think there's the basic services that we all want and expect in greater Minnesota, and if we don't have them, we're going to go backwards and downhill in a big hurry rather than remaining stable. So,
in the interest of time, let's take 2 more questions.
Just one more comment. I just want to say, as far as the redistricting, I was told by 2 former representatives of our state that served, that these lines were drawn with horse and buggy days in mind.
right.
And with technology, I really think that's an issue that should be addressed. I don't know who's going to do it.
Yeah, I think redistricting is always an important issue. The lines are redrawn after every census, and there's again, I don't pretend to be an expert in the area, but I think there's some case law that would probably prohibit exactly what you're talking about, because people have tried to gerrymander for different reasons, and it usually, I'm not sure you'd see a successful. I think somebody challenged that, and I actually wish that at one time there was, the kind of like our U.S. system. The Minnesota House was based on population. The Senate was, we had 1 senator for every county, so you tried to get some balance that way. The Supreme Court, when we took that to them and threw it out. It's sort of like the federal government saying, don't do what we do, of course, which is how our Congress and U.S. Senator are set up, but there is also a one person, one vote provision in the Constitution that then they say, well, you guys can't do that, right? It's sort of like running for state office, you're always in favor of local control, but it seems like when they get there, more in favor of controlling the locals. And so I think it would be an interesting idea. I'm just not sure how we'd get it done. But.
Thank you. Councilman Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Tim and Dan, for the information you presented to us this evening. But lest we all forget, any money that's given to any city in the form of LGA or property tax credits or whatever, it can only be given after it's taken. First they take, and this last legislature, increased taxes by $2 billion. So it's no wonder we can get a little more money back in the form of LGA. My problem with LGA is, first of all, it's a really nice carrot to hang out there for all these cities to belong to the coalition, but it gives everybody a false sense of the true cost of government. Nobody knows what it costs, because of all this money floating around in grants and LGA and the state cutting that pie up and giving it to the winners who they think should have it. It isn't fair, and I one day see that it'll be gone. I kind of agree with the Chamber in that sense. The funding for LGA, if I'm not mistaken, is done every 2 years. Is that correct?
No, actually, they appropriate for it every year.
Okay, so next year...
But the budget's supposed to be done every 2 years, but just like bonding is supposed to be done every 2 years, they end up doing it every year. It's a practical matter. They kind of revisit this, and they will be spending money this next year, as sure as I'm sitting here. So we'll probably propose, we have proposed an increase in funding for local aid, and because we know they're going to spend money on property tax relief, we have a strong preference that it goes to local aid as opposed to some of the other programs that we don't agree with.
So this new formula that you came up with and the state agreed with is only good for 1 year, basically. We don't know what's going to happen in 2015. I mean, 14 is set and 15 is up in the air.
Yes, the legislature can do whatever it wants every year that they're in session, but our history has been is once they set a formula that people agree on, it's not likely to be changed. That's why they ask everybody, do you support this formula? Do you support this formula? So I don't think there'll be any movement to change the formula. The question will be, do you add 15 or 20 or $50 million to it? So I don't think that there's, the legislature could do a lot of things, but I don't think, they're not likely to go back on this. They're just not, and maybe we have a new governor who doesn't like the program, then you're going to have problems again. If you have a governor who likes the program, then it's just the formula won't be changed. I add a little money to it every year. We had 10 years of stability in the local aid program, and that's what we want again, and I think there's a good chance we can achieve that. I don't think anything is good for more than 10 years. I mean, any formula, any program, but I think I think we set a direction here that I think people are likely to follow. I would say for 10 years, I don't think you're going to see that formula change very much. Maybe deal with a little problem here or there, but it's probably not going to change.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and as I understand, you'll stick around for a little bit.
We can, absolutely.
Councilman Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. I know you try to make it every year, but I notice you have one of our own working for you, Glenn Flattable.
Yes, so. Glenn is an interesting story, but he does his auction business. That's kind of, but he works part-time for our firm, and he is really creative, and we get absolutely the best press in the state. I mean, when he of course knows the Capitol Press Corps, and the big papers, and then he knows a lot of the regional papers too. So we get excellent press coverage, and that's due to Glenn. So yes, I didn't know you knew him.
Oh yeah, I think everyone knows the family here.
Okay, well he's very good at what he does. So
appreciate it.
Their house, in fact. We were on the LGA swing.
Oh, okay.
One, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Christensen's point, I understand exactly what he's saying. Money has to come from somewhere. That money was going to get spent last year. The question would be, would you feel better if, instead of the $600,000 coming to Willmar, if the $300,000 went to St. Paul and the $300,000 went to Minneapolis? You could do that. You could send them a check, and I'm sure Mayor Ryback and Mayor Coleman would say, thanks for seeing it our way, because we thought we should have had that money to begin with. That's what would have happened. It wouldn't have been returned to the taxpayer. It wouldn't have been not spent, but it would have went in the original proposal. We're talking about how it would divide up the $80 million. That would not have gotten divided into our favor. And so I understand what you're saying, and I'm sympathetic to that, because I've got a lot of concerns about the $2 billion. Same thing as you do. Makes my job as an economic developer a lot harder. Having said that, if they're going to spend that kind of money, then we want to make sure that we at least have a reasonable chance of getting our fair share back. I guess that's the other way to look at that. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. And that was just for information only, I understand? Yep. So we will move into the open forum. And Abdi, did you have...
Mr. Mayor and the Council, I want to say hello, everybody, to you. My name is Yusuf Ahmed. I am the African Development Center here in Willmar. I work for them. And I know some of you. I met some of you, and we had a meeting with some of you here in our office, and we stopped by. It was Sunday. It was unexpected for me to see one of our guys. He's sitting here. He was on the front page. I don't know if you have seen the Sunday paper. And what they do with this guy? What happened? I thought something bad happened, but it was about the bank, which was managing that. What's the place name? The name of the place, Center Point Mall. A section of the building has been sold, and we have, let me say, we have at least a good number of small businesses, and he's one of them. He has a good grocery store over there, which sells halal meat and milk and cheese and some Somali food stuff. So, and he's serving a lot of our community. I was reading the paper and I say, oh my goodness, this is like a bombshell. How come? Why don't we buy this one first of all? This will not happen to us if we buy it, but we didn't expect that to happen. And then I met with him today, and we discussed about this is this is legal. People can buy businesses, and this is, I mean, nobody can say why you buy a business. This is our store here. You cannot buy. No. But what I want to tell you is a whole community, like I mean, a good number of community customers are dealing with him, buy food from him, milk, cheese, whatever. I mean, they also go to the Cub Food or Cashwise. I went this morning to Cashwise. The other day I went. I mean, we go also other business, but this is like our own food, our own community food. Like sometimes you don't eat goat meat. Do you eat goat meat? I don't think so. We have goat meat. They bring from Pennsylvania. There's a big butchery place that they transport from there all the way to Minneapolis. And we have two good, what they call market, like if you know about Carmel Market or in Minneapolis, if somebody knows, and a big shopping center, Somali, only for Somalis. I mean, they sell clothes, food, all kinds of things. But it's like, I can tell you, it's about, it's a Blissbury and 29th. I don't know if you know about that place. And there's another one, another mall in 10th and 24th of South Minneapolis. So we were talking about here in this town to build, we have in St. Cloud, we have a nice small business, also a small mall over there. About 15, 20 businesses are there. Now we were talking about here to have our own small mall. We already have it here, but we didn't buy it. So there's about, I can say, about 10, 15 small businesses there, but we didn't buy it. So this has happened unexpectedly, and he has been given this letter to say you have to leave within the end of September, like 30th September. You have to vacate the whole thing. And you know about a business which is there for not only him. There's also a cafe shop. There's also another 2 or 3 other businesses which are there also, clothing store or others. So they have been given only little time. So, and you know that entrepreneurs, I mean, Africans or Somalis, they are by nature entrepreneurs. They work hard. They just form a small kind of business, and they promote business always, and they try to play by the rules. And I think the police chief is here and everybody is here, but we are law-abiding people. We work hard, and we at least try to be integrated to the community. And we would like, if this happens to us very quickly, saying, I mean, it will be discouraged. Like, we'll say, why this is happening? Only 30 days for a big community like us to just say goodbye, just get out of here. So if we can help these communities, these businesses, if we can help them and say, to interfere, the mayor and the council, at least the bank to say, at least give them some time. That's what we are asking for.
How much time do you need?
I don't know. I don't know about that. Sorry. Thanks so much.
Abdi, good to see you.
Good to see you, Mayor. Thank you, council leaders, local leaders. My name is Abdi. I've been here for 11 years, and I think most of the people I know, their face, and Mr. Anderson. Matter of fact, I read the newspaper last week, and when I see the mall, Centerpoint Mall, to move on these African businesses, it was really, I see the emotion of the community. They feel a lot of things in their mind, and they said, city don't want us, local people don't want to welcome us, and all these things. And I say, did you talk to the city council? And they said, yes, the mayor was there in the meeting, and I wasn't feeling that way. I wasn't feeling good. And I think the expectation of our community was more than these people move out from the Centerpoint Mall. The reason being is this. I will ask you this question to the mayor and the city council. Do you have any coordination to this community between the city and the local newcomers?
I'm sorry, I didn't get...
Any coordination, like coordinator or liaison that works between the city and the community?
We do, and that would be Mr. Councilman Ahmad. Do you work as a liaison?
As a liaison, yes, that's part of our job as elected officials to work with any groups, not just within our wards, but within the entire community.
My question is the local bilingual Somali speaking. Do you have any Somali speaking who can really, both cultures can coordinate and make it the city more comfortable to understand the community? I'm not talking about Caucasian.
I would ask
No, we have no such staff position at the city.
Okay. The reason I ask this question is because if you go to city of Minneapolis, St. Paul, or St. Cloud, or whatever, the city needs to really learn a little more about the cultural issues of these newcomers. And these people are more creative. They work hard. They have about 6,500 people working Genio, and they contributed the United Way fees. They pay taxi, and they do a lot of things. And I was not really seeing that part of the coordination is missing from the city of Willmar. And I'm a part of this local residents, but I will remind you what's missing from there. I think we have to look back on that. My just suggestion, personally. And the last time when the people was told to move out from the Center Point Mall, I think I know the private person bought the center, and I know lawfully the city can do nothing because the private owner is the buyer. But then the city can have a responsibility to at least do two things. Because our dream as an Americans is to promote the businesses. Thank you for that PowerPoint. In this case, the city has to, I think, help this community where they can move. And that's my suggestion. At the same time, the timing. It has to be given a little more time because the 30 days is not enough. Because this business has been there more than 10 years, and they have a lot of heavy stuff and business that can be really thrown away, expired or whatever, before they get about it. So that's my situation, and the emotion of the community is a little high, to tell you the truth, as a leaders. So that's...
I will ask you again, how much time do you need?
I think about 130, at least 120 days. At least that's what business can organize and try to move. Or maybe 6 months is enough.
Do you have contact
6 months
with
is
the new
enough.
owners, Councilman Amon?
Pardon me?
Do you have
6 months
contact with the new owners?
No, I don't know.
I want to add one thing, Mr. Mayor. This businesses which are built there, they have upgraded a lot of things inside there.
Oh, they misspent money.
Machines there which cut speed. They are plumbing, like that they have to wash the speed. And so calculate at least $40,000, $50,000 each of them to put there. And now, within 30 days, absolutely it will be impossible for them to prep all these things. So at least since the city council and the mayor are here and they are the authority of this town. I know America is, you can buy any business, this is a private thing, but at least we want you to interfere in this thing and say at least
help
this business cannot just say 30 days, get out of here, because we have upgraded a lot of things, a lot of plumbing, and a lot of machineries are there. So that's...
what he's trying to say is...
As I understand it, Councilor, is that we, the city, does not have an option as far as doing things, helping financially or otherwise. Am I right?
Mayor and members of the council, I haven't had any specific proposals to evaluate or anything, but in its essence, this is obviously an issue of community concern, but it's not an issue that implicates the city government in any legal way. This is a private matter between a private property owner and that property owner's landlords. Certainly, members of the council or staff could do some outreach to either the owner who is selling the facility or the new owner and try and advocate for some better outcome here. But there's really nothing the city can do to, mandate that. this is not a matter that implicates the city. It's a private property issue.
I might ask the council if anyone knows the new owners that would feel comfortable in talking to them.
Mayor Yanis, I don't know who the new owners are, so.
I'm not
I don't know
aware.
for sure who they are either. I've heard rumors, but I don't know.
I think the letter, Mayor, the letter bank submitted was this, and the buyers, I heard for the rumors, not the real infos, but the Divine House.
Divine House, both houses. It's not official yet, but it's still, nobody knows who bought it, but the Divine House also, the name of.
This is the letter, the bank, I think.
Okay, I'll take that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We met with you last Thursday or Friday at the library to discuss this same thing, and unfortunately, most people come to government for the answer across this whole country, and government isn't here to decide what happens in the private sector unless it's a health or safety issue. Them selling the building, and you only have, the owners of the businesses only had a month-to-month lease there. That's unfortunate, but, government is here to, for protection, police protection, fire protection, sewer, water, lights, the gamut there. We can't really interfere with something that's done privately over there. And I know at the meeting we suggested that you immediately go to the rumored new owner and speak to them. You spoke, Abdu, about, or Abdi, you spoke earlier about a liaison to the council or to the city government, and we kind of expect you to be the liaison, or the ADC, African Development Center. We can't hire somebody to be on the council and be a liaison to the Somali community.
Why don't hire, Mr. Christensen? Why don't you hire someone to be licensed for you who's bilingual? Why?
Well, the Somali community is no different than Chinatown in New York or Polish Town in Chicago. I understand you wanting to have all those businesses in one spot. I completely understand it, and it's a good spot where you're at. However, this is America, and we have the freedom to go buy a building and then say, I want to do something else to this building. I want to produce whatever, or have my offices there. The best advice I think we can give you is to speak to the rumored new owner. I'll go talk to them if I know who they are. I'll go talk to them and then see if they can't extend your lease. But I don't know if I'll have any influence on them.
I think I opened my speech or my talking. I opened that we know this is America and you can buy it. We don't need you to lecture us, to tell us about America. We've been here a long time and we know about it. Okay? The only thing we are asking for you is help.
That's responsible.
Advocate. We're not asking you to, other things, but we want you and the mayor. This business has been there for a long time, has been upgraded, a lot of money has been spent. I think tonight, if you are the one who owns this business, you will be like, sorry about this thing, if this happens to you. What I'm saying is, I know that that's nothing to do with the mayor or the government, but what I'm saying is, if we can advocate and say, this business has been for a long time, it's not, it's a matter of time. We're talking about the time. We're saying the time is not enough.
I agree with the council person that says that this, I think, was between you and the new owners. This is not between the city. The city cannot be involved.
It has nothing to do with the city. We know that. Talking about that. We know about the city. We come here. You see, when we have nowhere to go, we go to
the city.
This is the only place to say, can you help us, please?
What type of help do you like?
I think the mayor, this is what happened, and is trying to say. Okay, we understand, Mr. Christensen, in how the private issue works in America. We've been here for 31 years, and I do study the government system. Been really involving all this, but the point is, as a city council, say, I am the local member, the community living here. He pays $5,000 to the city tax, and he needs to be protect his rights. That's the one issue. The government leaders be responsible to protect where I can complain, where I can say my rights were violated. It's the city leaders, the government leaders. That's one issue. The second is when we come to the private buyers. Yes, the private can buy, but the city has a responsibility to really, like my friend said it, at least help in good manner, not really. I'm not saying push that guy, but say, these people has been here a little bit, so can we try to really increase a little time for them to move? At the same time, as a city council, you have responsibility to help this community where they can move. This is a city. Every building pays a tax. Building owners, they pay taxi. Business owners, they pay taxi. So you cannot say, it's your responsibility to do this or that. You are the one, my leader, so I come to complain about you. I mean, about somebody else. How can you help me? Is that what you're saying? No? Is that fair then?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Just a couple comments. I met with several of you on Saturday mid-morning and discussed at some length the issues that you're bringing up again tonight. The first I heard of the Center Point Mall being closed was by reading the West Central Tribune. Thank you, West Central Tribune, for that article. And I did talk to you, and I believe I've relayed the message with you too, and gave you some business cards related to, or city council cards related to what we can do and what we can't do. I also mentioned that we could get in touch with Steve Reinquist. And Steve Reinquist's job, along with their Bruce Peterson's job, is to help promote economic development in our community. That is the role of government. To what degree can we help you?
Exactly.
That we'd have to look into.
Exactly.
But there are tools available that government makes available to all types of businesses.
Yes.
And we also dealt with an issue of dealing with an issue that was hard to deal with, was the loss of a manufacturing company in town here. We lost 60 families, or 60 employees were working there, and I think 40 of them now, I don't know what they're doing. They might be spread out amongst the community, but these were skilled people, and we lost those jobs. And a business came in and purchased the other business. There's nothing we can do about it as government, but what we can do is be proactive by at least having a formula or a plan to help you find new areas. And I'm sure Steve Reinquist, because I've talked to him this morning by telephone, would be more than willing. I understand somebody had called him, but he wasn't in the morning that the telephone call was given. But he did say he's willing to sit down and talk with you to see what is available and to assist you in finding a facility or a place for each individual business. And that's what your tax dollars are for. That's his promotion. We're promoting stabilized businesses in the community. There's also some great low-interest loans out there that are available that you might want to consider too, based on how many jobs you're going to create. And that's about the extent we can do, but I'm willing to sit down in that meeting with you and talk with you.
And I think that's our idea, Mayor. I mean, City Council. That was our concerns, how we can advocate and just help people.
We can't make any promises.
We're not saying push these people, the private buyers, and just say something about it. Just support, So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's good. I can't read this. Who does this say here?
That's done. Mayor, they're done. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, they're leaving. It's all 4 of them.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we got everybody then.
Okay. Have we got everybody that that wanted to speak?
Do you wish to speak?
Okay. With that, we'll move, let's take a short recess, if we will, please. Be back here in 10 minutes?
That's good.
Short recess. reconvene this meeting as scheduled, and we'll have a report from the Finance Committee report for August 12th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item on our agenda was public comment, and there was no one present that wished to address us. The next item was the 2014 Mayor's proposed budget. Mayor Frankianish presented his proposed 2014 budget totaling $44,686,059. Of the total budget, $15,528,583 is for general operating, $16,773,881 is for capital improvements, $1,682,816 is for special revenue internal services, $2,499,201 is for debt service, and $8,201,578 is for waste treatment plant. It was noted that the general operating portion of the budget includes $1,703,036 in transfers for capital improvements. The proposed tax levy of $4,139,734 is the same as last year, with $3,992,734 for general operating and $147,000 for the street program. An overview of the estimated revenues and expenditures was presented. Revenues included an anticipated increase in local government aid. Changes in budgeted expenditures include reduction in travel and training by 50%, memberships and dues by 35%, and professional services by 35%. Elimination of dues for Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities and National League of Cities. Elimination of funding for Willmar Design Center, West Central Integration Collaborative, and Community Marketing Coalition. New position proposed for Human Resources and restoration of the Assistant Engineer position. During our discussion, council members raised questions regarding the methodology used for cutting travel and training, memberships and dues, and professional services. Discussion also included the pros and cons of eliminating funding for the Design Center, the Integration Collaborative, and the Marketing Coalition. The committee will continue to review and discuss the proposed 2014 budget over the next several meetings prior to the public hearing to be held December 2013. All of that was for information only. There was no old business and there was no new business. So unless there's questions, I would move to file these minutes.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to file the minutes of the Finance Committee report for August 12, 2013. Is there any discussion? Councilman Almond?
Just one question. On the Human Resources position, we haven't decided we need one yet. Why is it in the budget? Don't we usually go ahead with that, or are we just anticipating?
I did not put that in the budget, by the way.
Okay.
I'll comment on that. There's money in the budget in the event that that position is funded or is approved. So we've got money there. Because if we decide to do it and we didn't have money, then we'd have to figure out how we were going to fund it. So it's there in the event that it's needed.
But we'd have the money, we'd have the money in the bank either way if we would want to. We have $49 million in reserves. So, I mean, we're going to wait 1 year or 6 months to hire a new person. Why do we have to put in the budget? Because it's going to take 6 months, if not more, if we're going to hire a person to get them online. I don't know. I just question. Usually, it's like we're putting the cart before the horse. We should be deciding the decision first, if we're going to, and then fund it appropriately. That's just my thought.
My feeling exactly. By the way, Council Lady.
Councilmember Nelson.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. I just added there. I think a lot of things in the budget that we didn't discuss. So it's there for our review. So I'm not quite sure why you picked out that one, because I think there's some other things in there too. So
there are some other things in there that should be discussed and will be discussed.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
Mr. Mayor, I guess a question to Councilmember Anderson on, there's a lot of items in the proposed budget that you say that need a lot of further discussion. When will those discussions take place where the whole council will be able to participate?
I don't know that we've exactly set the dates for work sessions. I think we're planning 2 or maybe 3. Do we have dates?
We have not.
Okay.
You and I
know
probably need to
we
discuss
had-
that and set those agendas and such. But based on the meeting on the 12th, I would agree with Councilmember Anderson that there was a need to have some additional work sessions, but they have not yet been set, or whether they will be part of the Finance Committee around those dates has not been determined. I mean, I think that's for the Finance Committee and the Council to determine.
We feel that it's very important that we have everybody's participation,
I think so,
not just the Finance Committee.
Okay, I would agree with that, and look forward to those future meetings. I think that needs a lot of discussion.
Any further questions or comments? All those in favor of filing the minutes, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say no. That motion carries. And we'll go into the Public Works Report for August 13th, 2013. Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did hold our meeting on Tuesday, August 13th at 4:45 p.m. at City Hall. There was no public comment. Next item was to accept a bid and award contract for the Sperryville Lift Station. Mr. Josh Halverson of Davnie and Associates presented results from the August 8, 2013 bid opening for the construction and relocation of the Sperryville Lift Station. He said he received 4 bids, and the low bid was from Geislinger and Sons Incorporated in the amount of $285,000. The project schedule allows for a substantial completion by December 15th of this year and final completion by May of 2014. The majority of this funding for the project is from within the 2013 capital outlay budget. There was some discussion on the variation of bids and the comparison to the engineer's estimate, but after the discussions, a motion was made, seconded, and passed for the following, and I would like to introduce the resolution to accept the bid of Geislinger and Sons Incorporated in the amount of $285,000 and authorize our mayor and city administrator to enter into agreement on behalf of the city.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to accept the bid of Geislinger and Sons Incorporated in the amount of $285,000 and authorize the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement on behalf of the city. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That motion carries.
Our next item had to do with a stormwater drainage issue that was behind the Elks Club. This was for information only. Mr. Tim Hansen, who represented the Elks Club, met with our committee to discuss stormwater drainage issues that the Elks is experiencing in the alley behind their building. It appears that the catch basin behind their building may not be directing the runoff into the city's storm sewer on Litchfield Avenue, and they are experiencing water problems in the lower level and possibly undermining of the floor in the basement. The Elks Club is looking to the city for information, as this is a private system and the city holds no responsibility. Our committee discussed several possibilities whereby the affected property owners can work together to redirect the water. Mr. Hansen was directed to the city offices to speak to Mr. Bruce Peterson and obtain property owner and utility line information to proceed with his concerns. That was for information only. Next item was miscellaneous items. I had expressed my concern with the vehicle replacement and equipment purchases through our CIP program on anything over $20,000 being brought before committees and filling the vacant surveyor position in the engineering department. I believe that's a survey technician. My concern with the vehicle replacement and CIP purchases is that we have had an unwritten policy for since I've been on the council that those items would come before the council in their appropriate committee meetings before that money was spent. If that is not going to be the policy anymore, I'd like to know why, and if it is, then we better look at that CIP program because it's 5 years long and there's millions of dollars in there being spent. I want to know before the money's spent where it's going and why. There being no one other item. We had an update on the stormwater improvements, and that will be provided at one of the next meetings from Jared Vogue, who is our interim city engineer. He is preparing a list of incremental stormwater improvements for consideration. I might add they're affordable ones. With no other items coming before us, unless there's some questions, I'll move to file these minutes.
Did you have a question?
No, I'll wait.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes of the Public Works Report for August 13th, 2013. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. That motion carries. At this point, we'll have the Community Development Committee report for August 15th, 2013. Councilman Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did meet on Thursday, August 15th at 4:45. Item 1 was public comments. There was no one to speak before us. Item number 2, consideration of order for removal at 944 Olaf Avenue Northwest. Staff presented a request that the council order the removal of a structure at 944 Olaf Avenue Northwest. This is a property that has deteriorated over the years, and past attempts to have the property repaired or removed have been met without success. The committee reviewed correspondence and photographs. It was acknowledged that the structure was in terrible condition and did constitute a threat to health and safety. I just note that there are 2 houses on this property, and this is the smaller one to the northwest of the main house. Motion was made and seconded that the council declare as hazardous and order the removal of the home at 944 Olaf Avenue Northwest. And I'll introduce that motion.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded that the council declares as a hazardous and ordered the removal of the home at 944 Olaf Avenue Northwest. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, can Mr. Peterson explain the process for the entire council?
Councilmember Fagerly, members of the council. The process typically doesn't come to the council until staff has exhausted its in-house options. We've worked with this property owner for a period of time. The conditions continue to deteriorate. The home is not occupied by any human beings. It's occupied by garbage and debris, and it's basically used for storage, and it's very much deteriorated. The next step after the lack of success at the staff level is to send out or is to have the council direct an order to be filed. We'll submit, or we will file that with the property owner. We'll make sure that they get that order and it gets served upon them properly. If they do not respond to the council's order, the next step would be to pursue a court action. And this has been done before, and Mr. Scott has led us through that process. And if they do not respond to the court order, at that point, the city can, at the end of that time frame, the city can remove the structure and go back after the property owner for its expenses.
Thank you, Bruce. Any further discussion?
Just a question on the procedure, Mr. Mayor. You said that we would pay the full cost for removal of the structure and then be able to assess that back to the property owner? Is that how the process works?
I believe it occurs as a lien, doesn't it? Or does it go as an assessment, Mr. Scott?
It's a lien. It's certified to the county for collection with taxes, just as any special assessment would be. It's practically speaking the same thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Just a question. Since there's 2 houses on that property, is that 2 parcels of land, or will that lien be able to be placed on where the other house is also?
I believe they exist on one parcel.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So does that mean that it does have 2? What was the other question that you had?
No.
I was just asking if there's 2 houses on the property, if it's one piece of land, or if it was, when the lien went on, if it would go on the whole property.
Okay, and it would go on just The house that's...
It would go on the parcel, and that parcel is actually occupied by the other home and the people that live there and own that property. So this structure really exists as a storage building on a residential property. It's really no different than if someone had a garage or a shed behind their house that was dilapidated. We'd be pursuing the same action. In this particular case, it happens to be an old home.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. That motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 3, Economic Development Commission update. Steve Rehnquist, EDC Director, updated the committee on the development of a county-wide business loss protocol, which was a brainstorm of Councilman Amon, and the City Council agreed with it. He brought it to our attention before he brings it to his Joint Powers Board, which I thought was pretty nice. Also, a significant amount of time was then spent reviewing the 5-year work plan that has been adopted by the EDC Board. And those attachments are with the report. Activities of the EDC and success in meeting some of the work plan goals were discussed in detail. That was for information only. Number 4 was old business. There was no old business. New business. I inquired about graffiti on a downtown building here on 5th Street. Staff replied that the matter was being addressed. And I also asked staff to look into some weed problems that exist on East Highway 12 right-of-way and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe properties. And I did notice coming tonight that the old Highway 12 motel was mowed this weekend. So they must have been listening to our committee meeting. So there was no further business come before the board. We adjourned at 5:35. I move to file these minutes.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to file the minutes of the Community Development Committee report for August 15th, 2013. Is there any discussion? Councilman Nama.
Question, Councilman Fagerly, was that the issue of the barber shop downtown on 5th?
Yes, the old Ranny Men's Center,
Yeah,
Denny Dawson's barber shop.
I called that in about a week ago.
Okay, I think a lot of us did. The mayor did,
Yeah.
you did, I did.
Okay, thank you.
All those, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. That motion carries. We'll get into the consideration of special assessment hearing, unpaid snow and ice removal. Kevin, would you like to explain these to us?
Mayor Yanish, members of the council, you have before you a request to set a hearing for those violations for Willmar Code Chapter 13 concerning the failure to remove snow and ice on certain properties with the removal done by the city or its agent. We have a $65 charge there, and we're recommending that we follow our procedure of setting the hearing, and after the hearing, after taking testimony, most likely certifying that for collection in the year of 2014.
I move we set the hearing for September 3rd.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to set the hearing for September 3rd at 7:03 p.m. at the council meeting, and that would be for 1102 Becker Avenue Southwest. All those in favor, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have a similar violations of Municipal Code Chapter 9, failure to cut weeds or grass. And with such compliance, the city or its agent cut the grass and weeds at the following properties that are listed before you. It is staff's recommendation that we set a hearing for September 3 and subsequent to testimony attempt to certify these for collection in the year 2014.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to set the hearing on September 3rd at 7:04 p.m. for the unpaid weed and grass removal. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That motion carries.
And Mayor Yanish, members of the council, we have the last one. It's a violation of Chapter 9 for unpaid garbage removal after the city got involved with a garbage problem. That is for $402.50. It is staff's recommendation that we hold a hearing on September 3 and subsequent to taking testimony, certify that for collection in 2014.
Mr. Mayor, motion to set the hearing.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to set the hearing for September 3rd at 7:05 p.m. for the unpaid garbage removal. Any discussion? Councilman Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What's our experience with people coming in and paying this before it comes to a hearing? Do many people do that?
Small handful, one or two, after the notices are received in about 3 days.
Okay, and then we just take them off the list?
You take them off the list.
The hearing? Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say no. That motion carries. And we have the consideration of the Civic Center Arena special event by on-sale liquor license holder permit.
Mayor Yanish, members of the council, we have a request for an on-sale liquor license at the Civic Center on August 30th. The Oaks and the Eagle Creek are having that band concert. It's actually just a backup for a concert being scheduled at the fairgrounds, but in case of rain, they need to lock the Civic Center in. And this permit came a little bit late, and so we're recommending that you approve the permit pursuant to the Community Ed and Recreation Board, who is not going to meet until the 23rd. They need to, by our ordinance, need to make a comment first for any event in our parks or in our Civic Center.
I'd move approval, subject to the Community Ed and Rec Board approval.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded, subject to the approval of the Community Ed and Rec Department, to approve the permit on a roll call vote pursuant to Community Education and Recreation Board approval of August 23rd, 2013. Any discussion on that? Councilman Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is this hairball? Okay. Just wondering, I thought I heard it on the radio. So.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Councilmember Christensen.
Aye.
Amon.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Dockin.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
DeBleek.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
And that carries. We need a motion to reschedule the council meeting from September 2nd because of Labor Day to September 3rd.
So moved.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded to reschedule the council meeting from September 2nd to September 3rd, 2013. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. That motion carries. Is there any old business that we need to talk about? Any new business?
There was a letter to the editor in the paper regarding some ordinances, and I think we got a response regarding that property, and I just wondered if it would be appropriate to ask staff to comment about that at this time.
Sure, if they want.
I believe the letter to the editor that Councilmember Nelson is referring to was written last week with regards to a property on 20th Avenue Southwest. It is a property that did experience some problems. Staff was notified, and we did receive several complaints. Staff followed up on the complaints that did come through our IT system, actually. They were computer generated, so it's nice to know that that system works well, and we're able to communicate back and forth with the complainants to keep them informed of the process. We did follow up on that property. Staff investigated, issued several citations by way of a high visibility notice. Within a matter of a couple of days, the issues were addressed, the garbage was removed, the property was cleaned up, and for all intents and purposes, that case was closed. Staff does continue to work to determine if that property needs to be included in the rental program. We are not able to determine currently if the owner of the property is the resident, and that's ongoing. We're still trying to figure out how to do that because he has not responded to any mail that we've sent out. So as far as zoning violations are concerned, there are no zoning violations that exist on that site. We have found out that the property owner does in fact have scheduled garbage pickup, so that's not an issue. It's not required in the city, but they do have it. We also are, we've been asked why we don't look in sheds if there's garbage in sheds. Well, we don't know if there's garbage in sheds because we don't take it upon ourselves to look in there. I think there's some deeper issues involved with opening buildings and going into buildings to look to see what's in there. And it's been our departmental practice not to do that. And I recommend that we continue to maintain that practice of not going in buildings. If there's a terrible odor or something, we'll contact the property owner and ask them to let us in so that we can investigate a complaint, but nothing's been determined to exist to that extent on this site. And there was never any evidence of rodents or any type of infestation on that site. So it's a common claim, but rarely determined to be accurate.
Charlene, do we need to take any action on this?
No, there's no action for the City Council at this time.
Okay, thank you. That being said, the announcement of the council meeting. Is there any further new business, by the way? Councilman Ahman.
Mr. Mayor, I think this may be pertinent to the issue that was brought up by Mr. Christensen in the Public Works Committee meeting dealing with the ordinance on discharge of firearms. I was wondering if it would be okay to ask staff to, and Steve also, President, I talked to him briefly about to see if there is a need or a demand or if that's something we could grow on, is to have a bow on our archery range up at the old waste treatment plant. I would like to see if it's first of all feasible, and I'm just wondering that may give more information to the Public Works.
And who would you discuss that with?
Okay.
If that's a desire, we can gather that information in terms of feasibility, liability, and cost of operating such.
Yeah.
So we can gather that information.
Yeah. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Mayor Yanis.
Councilman?
I have a new business. I need to ask to be excused. Next council meeting, the 3rd, I'll be having surgery that day, so I'll probably need to be off for most of September.
Good luck. Okay.
Mayor Yanis.
Go ahead.
Okay. There is a park plan that's being worked on right now, and I thought and maybe Mr. Bresendine would like to speak because there is a survey that it's available to everyone right now, and I just ask him to talk about that a second.
Sure. Please do.
Mayor Yanis, members of the council, as Audrey has stated, we have begun the process of a park planning item, and we've employed Mid-Minnesota and Matt Johnson and Don Winkler to assist us with that process. Currently, we have opened up a survey to the community about the park system, and one of those questions on there, Mr. Ahman, is related to whether or not there is a need in this community for an archery range. So I would defer people to have them refer people, I should say, to the website, either for the Community Ed and Rec website or the city website. The survey is on there. It's an electronic copy. It probably takes about 2 minutes to take that survey, so if the community would assist us in doing that, we can get some good feedback as we move forward with the park plan that we hope to have completed by early winter.
Thank you very much. Is there any further new business? Hearing none, we'll do the announcement of council meeting dates. Councilman Ahman.
Wednesday, this Wednesday, 4:45, conference room 1.
This Wednesday?
Labor Relations.
Councilman Anderson, Finance.
Finance Committee will meet Monday, the 26th at 4:45.
And Councilman Christensen.
Public Works, August 27th, 4:45.
And Councilman Fagerly.
Community Development, August 29th, Thursday, 4:45.
These are all in council room. Councilman 4, or 1, I would imagine.
Conference room 1.
Did you have a question?
I just wanted to ask a question about an item that's on the Labor Committee.
Oh, sure.
Meeting. I believe it refers to establish and adopt process for preparation of council and committee agendas prior to meetings. And I just was curious what that's about and if it's appropriate for at the labor meeting versus for the council to be discussing.
I think Councilman Ahman can give you a better description of that than I can.
Through the years, this has been on my mind. Audrey, I told you I've got a lot of things on my mind, a list of them. But it seems to me, maybe this is just my situation, maybe the rest of you are all comfortable, but I wanted to bring this issue up so that we have a process to go through so that the council understands what's coming up, what the future agenda items are, who's responsible to get that agenda out, how it's done, who collaborates with what group. So we have a process that we can receive the information in adequate time to review. And I think sometimes it's no fault of anybody's, just that staff is trying to push things forward and need to get done. And we have things that we want to get done too. But right now, I think we need to set a process up so that we know the process to establish an agenda item. When the meeting is going to get done, we have time to review it. We have time to approve the agenda. And it's going to take a little communication, but then there isn't any surprises where we come into a meeting and here's an issue, we need to act on it now. I hate that. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I'd rather have time to research it just because I'm that kind of a guy. Not that there's no lack of trust. It's just an issue that I find very difficult to do on this job. And it's just a request that we should discuss so that we have a process in place where staff and us both agree that they'll have to present it in a certain time frame prior to, so that we're not just dropping everything we have to do in our regular lives and attend to that need. And just be a little more formula related so that everybody's more formal on it.
Councilmember Nelson,
that's the intent.
Yeah,
we were going to discuss that at the meeting. I talked to Dennis earlier just for discussion.
Okay. Yeah. I just was curious about it. I know there were some things in the organizational study talking about our committee structure and does it work correctly and so on. And I guess I would say that that's probably a topic for a retreat or at that process versus at the labor meeting. So
it's on the agenda. If you don't want to act on it, we want to act on it. I told Dennis we'll sit down. If you don't like the items on the agenda that I brought forward, you can add some or I can add some. So
it was just a question.
Okay. I have a comment. Just a reminder that we have the organizational study meeting tomorrow, 4:45 or 5 o'clock?
4:45.
4:45 here. Televised or recorded anyway.
Did you have a question?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a move to adjourn and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.